When I first pulled up to my new home, I thought I had found my forever place. A wide stretch of land. It's an old 150-year-old ranch house with weathered wood and a front porch big enough for summer evenings. I could already picture the quiet mornings, the sound of wind in the trees, and maybe even a few horses grazing in the distance. It felt like stepping into a piece of history, something solid, untouched. And mine. But I barely had time to unload the moving truck before the storm rolled in. Not a thunderstorm, not rain. This was the HOA, the Homeowners Association, and they didn't come with cookies or welcome baskets. 3 board members marched right up my driveway, clipboards in hand, looking like they'd been planning this ambush for weeks. They didn't even ask my name before one of them blurted out, "This property isn't supposed to be yours. The association has plans for it." I stood there stunned, thinking maybe this was some misunderstanding, but they made it clear. They wanted the ranch, every acre of it, and they weren't shy about saying so. The tone in their voices made it sound less like a request and more like a demand. They tossed around phrases like community, interest, and historical repurposing, as if they were doing me a favor by taking it off my hands. Inside, I was boiling. I had just signed the papers. I had the keys. And yet, here they were, acting like I was some squatter who wandered in by mistake. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to keep my home. I was going to turn the tables. What they didn't know was that I'd been doing my homework long before moving here. And within weeks, the balance of power in this little community was about to shift in a way no one saw coming, because the next time they came storming up my driveway, I wouldn't just be the new guy. I'd be the new HOA boss. And that's when things really got messy. The weeks after that first run when the HOA felt like living in some strange small-town drama I hadn't signed up for. Every time I walked outside, I'd catch glimpses of neighbors peeking through blinds, whispering in driveways, or pretending to water their lawns while keeping one eye on me. It didn't take long to realize the ranch wasn't just another house on the block. It was a piece of land everyone seemed to have an opinion about. The property itself was older than the neighborhood that had grown up around it. Long before there were manicured lawns and HOA newsletters, this land was a working cattle ranch. The original barn still stood, leaning just slightly, but strong. Old oak trees dotted the property, some with carved initials from generations back. It was history you could touch, and that made it valuable, not just in money, but in pride. The HOA's obsession with it started to make more sense the more I dug. Old meeting records hinted at development opportunities and heritage projects. It sounded nice on paper, but I could read between the lines. They wanted control. They wanted the land repurposed into something that fit their polished image of the community. And a weathered ranch with a stubborn new owner didn't fit the plan. I started going to the public HOA meetings, quietly at first, just to listen. That's when I began to notice cracks in their perfect facade. The same few people made all the decisions. The same few people controlled the budget and the rest of the neighborhood. They mostly stayed quiet, maybe too scared to speak up. The more I learned, the more I realized this wasn't just about me keeping my home. This was about how much power a handful of people had over everyone here. And if they were willing to come after me so openly, I could only imagine what they'd done to others who didn't have the time or resources to fight back. I didn't plan to be a leader when I moved here. But if I wanted to keep my ranch, I was going to have to step right into their world and beat them at their own game. It didn't take long before the HOA made their next move. A letter arrived in my mailbox, stamped with their official seal, listing a string of so-called violations on my property. The list was almost laughable. Things like unapproved exterior paint color, the house hadn't been painted in decades, non-regulation fencing, the original wooden fence from the 1800s, and unauthorized structures, the barn. It was clear they weren't trying to keep the neighborhood tidy. They were trying to push me into a corner. I started talking to some of the neighbors, and that's when the quieter stories began to surface. An elderly couple a few streets over had been forced to cut down their century-old maple tree after the HOA claimed it was a safety hazard. Another family had been fined for leaving their garden hose visible from the street. Most people had just given in because fighting costs more than it was worth. But every one of them told their story with the same look in their eyes, frustration mixed with a sort of tired acceptance. It struck me that my fight wasn't only about the ranch anymore. This HOA had been running unchecked for years, and my arrival had simply given them a new target. The deeper I dug, the more I uncovered questionable budget reports, closed-door meetings, and property decisions that benefited the same small circle of board members. At the same time, I began to notice the subtle games they played outside of official channels. My trash cans would be tipped over. HOA inspectors would wander my property when I wasn't home. I even caught one of them taking photos through the fence late at night. Every small act was meant to rattle me, to make me feel like I didn't belong here, but they underestimated just how far I was willing to go. I wasn't the type to pack up and leave because someone made life uncomfortable. If anything, their pressure only pushed me to move faster with my plan, and soon the very system they had built to keep control over everyone would be the same system I'd use to take it all away from them. By the time the next HOA election was announced, I had spent months quietly building my case. I attended every meeting, took detailed notes, and spoke to more residents one-on-one than the board had in years. At first, people were cautious, but once they realized I wasn't just another complainer, they began sharing things they've been holding back for a long time: old letters, meeting minutes, and even financial documents they've kept tucked away. It became clear that the HOA had been operating like a private club, making decisions that suited a select few while hiding behind community rules. And the ranch, that was supposed to be their crown jewel. They had plans drawn up for turning it into a heritage park, which sounded nice until you saw the luxury clubhouse and private tennis courts on the blueprint. They hadn't been protecting history. They'd been plotting a takeover. The tension in the neighborhood started to shift. People who had been silent for years now greeted me at the mailbox, asking quietly, "How's it going?" Some slipped me envelopes with documents, others whispered warnings about certain board members. The more they pushed me to back down, the more determined I became. Then came the night that made it clear the fight was about to hit a breaking point. I came home late to find a large, official-looking sign staked right in the middle of my front yard. This property under HOA review. It was a message not just to me, but to everyone watching. They wanted to show they still had control. I didn't pull the sign out. I left it there, lit by the porch light, knowing it would only make what came next more powerful. Because, in just a few days, the community would gather for the annual HOA meeting, the one where the new board would be voted in, they thought. I was walking into that meeting as the stubborn new homeowner they'd been trying to push out. What they didn't realize was that I'd been gathering more than just information. I had the numbers. I had the support. And I was about to walk straight into their territory. With the power to take it all from them, the night before the HOA election, I was going over my notes one last time when there was a knock at the door. It wasn't a friendly neighbor dropping by. It was one of the board members, the same man, who had first told me the ranch wasn't supposed to be mine. He stood on the porch, arms crossed, with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I think we can work something out," he said, his voice low. "Drop out of the election. Let us handle things, and maybe we can overlook those violations." It was almost laughable, but before I could answer, he leaned in closer. "You should know. There's more going on here than you think." Then, he walked away, leaving me with a warning that felt less like advice and more like a threat. That night, I couldn't shake his words. What else was going on? The next morning, I got my answer. A neighbor I'd been working with handed me a file she'd kept hidden for years. Copies of property transfer records, showing the HOA had quietly acquired multiple lots in the neighborhood using a separate community trust. And the ranch was the final piece they needed to complete some larger deal. It wasn't just about control anymore. If they got the ranch, they could sell the combined property to a developer for millions. All while telling residents it was for community improvement. No wonder they were desperate. The realization hit hard. This election wasn't just a fight over rules or fines. If I lost, I'd lose my home. The neighborhood would lose its history. And a handful of people would walk away with a payday that no one else even knew was coming. As the meeting drew closer, the tension became almost physical. I could feel it in the air when I walked outside, see it in the way people avoided eye contact, and hear it in the clipped conversations on the sidewalks. The HOA thought they were the ones holding the final card. But what they did,